And hello, everyone. Let's do a sound check and we'll get started. Welcome to the Profs channel. If you've never been here before, I'm glad to have you. All right, looks like the sound is fine. So I'd like to welcome you to today's show. Today, I'm going to be telling a story, and this story is very important. It's a very meaningful story. It's something that I don't really talk about often, and I've never talked about here on YouTube. So I figure it's a good time to do so. Um, and that is Hurricane Katrina, my story told 20 years later. And unfortunately, because of the psychos on the internet, I'm not really able to tell this story the way that I would like to, which is in the sharing of many personal details or personal photographs, etc. But I'll do my best tonight to tell the story in the way that I can best do so with all things considered. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. And for those of you who might be new to the channel, please do feel welcome to join the chat or join the comment section under the video. My people are really lovely here, and please do enjoy discussing with the community. Um, this story tonight is very difficult to understand if you have not experienced it yourself. And I know that that pretty much goes without saying, but I think it's easy to neglect the gravity and the magnitude of a disaster such as we'll be discussing tonight. All too often in our world, we're caught up in the day to day and in the moment. And we don't have much context for things that we don't know about. And I thought this was my opportunity to tell this story in a way that I can relay meaningful things to you because this story matters. And there's an entire universe that you're unaware of that existed before this hurricane 20 years ago and since. And it was really a game changing or foundational. The changes that precipitated from this disaster are really unknown to the world, uh, or very little is known. And so that's what I'd like to do tonight. And for those of you who are longtime viewers of this channel, maybe you'll get to know me a little better and my path, and and maybe not. Anyhow, so what we're going to do is we're going to go back, oh, 25, 30 years to start, and and that's how we're going to discuss this thing. And yeah, I don't really have much to say. There's not much to share, like I said, without the ability to share personal information. There's not really much to share on the screen, but I do have a few slides for you to help you. Um, but wow, this is just a big wow, okay? And so I'm going to prepare to get started. And I just realized that there's one more slide I need to pull up. So let me get going on that while you wait. Let's see. Right. Apologize for the wait. I thought I had this ready to go, and I just realized this one I did not upload. While I do this, please be aware that I have pinned the support pathways, etc., at the top of the live chat. In case you'd like to support this channel, please do. We have several pathways for you to support the channel, including a GoFundMe, which is currently active. So if you'd like to support my GoFundMe, go check that out. It's pinned in the link tree at the top of the chat. Okay, so let's see. Let's see if I can do this. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I think I'm going to go with this one. Okay, good to go. Let's see. All right, so welcome in here. So I'd like to take you back to approximately the year 2000. Okay. Um, in the year 2000, I was living in New Orleans. I had completed my second college degree. No, I was nearing the completion. Um, I'm a little scrambled in trying to upload that, but in the 2000s, early 2000s, I was completing my degree, and as I was nearing completion, I had a little boy, and so I graduated. Okay, I graduated in 2004, and I immediately started working. Okay, and by that I mean I had already been obviously working since teenage years, and then throughout college. And then in the time period that I graduated, almost immediately, I started at the suggestion of a teacher. So I came into contact with an individual who was a school music teacher in one of my other jobs that I had at the time I was completing my degree. And to be honest with you, I never really thought of going into the classroom. It wasn't my interest so much. I was daily performing. So in the lead up to Hurricane Katrina, um, I had for 10 years been an active performer in the city where pretty much 5 nights a week, I would say 5 nights a week, I was a full time musician. Okay. So I had a day job and I also did an entire full time music career. And that included playing at all sorts of events. Okay. So I played at anything you could possibly imagine, uh, in things you couldn't even imagine, a literal working musician. And that was a really wonderful life. And it's actually how I met my child's mother. So, in this time period of the early 2000s, I met my child's mother. And before you know it, my child is born. And so this was the momentum of life. So I was perfectly happy performing. And like I said, I had this job in which I was working. And in the course of this work, I came across many individuals. And one of the individuals I came across, we got to talking. And I had told him how I had just graduated, and I was dissatisfied with the pay that I was making in this day job. And he said, "You know what? You should teach." And I said, "Oh, I never really thought about that, but okay." But to back it up, I had been really, really fortunate in my teenage years to come across some teachers who were absolutely legendary in the area. And these teachers were highly reputable and had many successful students. And so I decided, is of sorts, to go to them. I decided, let me go to these couple guys and discuss this with them. And so when I went to them, they highly encouraged it with the concept of, hey, yeah, we need more of our people in the classroom. So you go ahead, go do it. As a matter of fact, we will give you a recommendation. So with that, and with this gentleman who suggested it, I went to the school board office and talked to the director of music. And I said, hey, this is where I'm at. And what do you think? And immediately she said, yeah, I'll hire you. And so she said, this is going to work like this. Your first year, you're going to have a mentor teacher. So you're basically going to apprentice with this guy who's going to be your mentor, and he's going to show you the ropes the first year, and then after that, you'll get your own schools. So I shadowed this guy, and what this guy ended up doing, after he's kind of got the ball rolling, he'd go on and do other schools because in many instances there was short staffing, so any music teacher would have to go to at least two, maybe three schools. And so that's what I did as I shadowed him. And then we ended up kind of playing ping pong because he would go somewhere and leave me somewhere. And then he would dip back in and I would dip back out and go somewhere else and blah, blah, blah. And that's how I was learning the way that things were done there. And so that was my first year. And that was really wonderful. It was really, really wonderful. And in the meantime, I continued my uh, uh, performance at night. Okay, my nightly gigs. So basically, the way that was working is it was a literal full time job. I mean, 80 hours a week. Because I'm doing my 35 hours a week or whatever it might be in the school system, and then I'm doing another 40 hours at night throughout the week. And anyhow, that catches us up to August of 20. No, I'm sorry, of 2005. So there we are, and I remember it very well because I had chosen when my child was born. I decided to move uh, very near to his grandparents because I thought that it would facilitate uh, being a working dad and that sort of thing. So I ended up moving very near this the grandparents of my son, and it was wonderful because it was literal walking distance. So I could easily walk just around the corner, and we could do handoffs and all this stuff that we had to do. We'd go have lunches or dinners or whatever it might be. It was a really wonderful setup. It was ideal. I look back on that time with a lot of sentimental feelings because things were just phenomenal. Um, and on top of that aspect, the relationships that I had built in those 10 years prior were just incredible. We had such tight knit friendships and musical relationships, and these relationships were very, very close. And anyone who happens to be a musician in the crowd, you might understand that when you get to playing with people all the time, several nights a week for 5, 10 years, uh, it's just effortless. Okay, it's an effortless task to perform because you get to know each other that well. Um, and so there was so much going on. Okay, there were so many of these relationships with the musicians, with the family, um, with the friends, and with the jobs. And it was an incredible time. Uh, Something I'd term a functional community. It's just absolutely beautiful. You get to know all your neighbors, all your coworkers, all your students and their families, and your colleagues. It's just an incredible setup. The way things should be in a small community where everyone is working together. And that was the state of life in August of 2005. Just a wonderful life. And um, and so, as I mentioned, I moved into this neighborhood, and with me came all my things. So a piano. I had a whole football team. I remember that I had a whole football team. Based not a whole football team. 5 guys from the football team helped me to move my piano into my apartment, and with that, I had an extensive collection of books, of sheet music, of manuscripts of music I had written. Um, I had so many things from my grandparents that I was gifted, like photographs, mementos, antiques. Um, I had a wonderful collection of compact discs, because in that time we were using compact disc, and since high school I had been collecting compact disc. The BMG music group where you pay a certain amount and you just have those things coming in all the time. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful collection of things. As well, I had a bunch of instruments. I had flutes because I played flute and saxophone, and so I had flutes and saxophones and all of my instruments, um, and just all the irreplaceable things. the handwritten manuscripts, the books that you're not going to easily find, because I used to be that guy that I'd go around to all of the library book sales, and I would buy books as a hobby. So I had a huge bookshelf that I had gotten. This mansion, literal mansion, had pulled out an entire bookshelf that covered a whole wall in a study. And I got that from those people, and I had it moved into my place. So I had an extremely large bookshelf that covered an entire wall, and it was full. It was just a wonderful life, all my things, right? And so what happened is, uh, in the days immediately prior to Hurricane Katrina, like everyone, you see on television that there's something brewing, and then you see it approaching. And I really didn't have many concerns because being in the Gulf Coast, it's a regular occurrence. Almost every few years, you have a hurricane to experience, and I had experienced many in my life. Um, I can think back to evacuating many times, and also to a lot of hurricane damage. I remember a tree falling on our house when I was a little teeny bopper, and causing extensive damage. And just I remember evacuating many times before. So everyone is very familiar with a hurricane. What you do is when it's coming right at you, you just get out of Dodge for a few days. And it never is a big deal. You always come back and everything's still there. And so that's where I was. And it was wonderful. And so we saw this thing approaching, and I thought, no, I'm not going to evacuate unless I really have to, but I'll keep an eye on it. And I specifically remember the turning point because, uh, like many people, I had a television in the bedroom. And I remember on that occasion that night I laid down to sleep. I watched the television and put on the news, and I saw that this thing was going to enter the Gulf of Mexico overnight. And I thought, hey, it's fine. It's fine. So I'll check it in the morning. So I didn't freak out, but I made some phone calls, you know, called my mom, I think, my dad, my grandparents or something, and said, hey, this thing's coming this direction. Um, I'm just going to keep an eye on it. If I have to, I'll just get in the car tomorrow and get the hell out of Dodge. And so that's what I did. Now, let me see if I can pull this up, because the very next thing that happened is I woke up that morning to this site here. Okay. And I hate to say it because I think I overslept. I must have woke up about 10 a.m. because when I woke up to this site right here, um, you don't understand the amount of urgency. Because prior to this, the thing was smaller before it entered the Gulf of Mexico. It didn't look as intimidating. It looked like your normal hurricane. So I went to sleep. Well, when I woke up that morning, this is what I was looking at, which was a hurricane that nearly filled the entire Gulf of Mexico. And let me just say, when you wake up to this, and it wasn't looking like this before bed, um, the level of urgency just peaks at 125%. I mean, I literally didn't need caffeine that morning. Okay, I just woke up startled because the minute I woke up, I turned the TV on and I saw this, and I said, oh my God, get out now. So what I did is I called my son's grandparents who lived in the neighborhood, and I said, hey, I'm getting out now. What are you going to do? And Grandpa said, oh, yeah, we're getting out now. I said, me too. I said, you want to take the kid? You want me to take the kid? He said, we'll take him. I said, where are you going? Texas. I said, okay, well, I'm going Florida. So this is what happened. And and so what happened is uh, I brought him over. I immediately came back home and I started throwing stuff in the car. At the time, I had a car. So I threw a suitcase of clothes. I packed a suitcase with clothes. I I grabbed a box, a cardboard box, and threw some important papers in there, like birth certificate, couple important papers in there. At the time, I was able to have cats. I had not yet developed a cat allergy, so I had a beautiful cat, and I grabbed the litter box and freshened it up or whatever, put it in the car, threw the cat in the car, got in the car, went right to the gas station, topped off the tank, and got the hell out of Dodge. So it was very interesting because I hit I-10 eastbound. And like I said, we all figured we'd be back in 3 days. So it's a very interesting thing because as I was approaching the portion of the interstate where you either go northward into Mississippi or eastward into Florida, I noticed that there were several state troopers and highway workers who were putting up the barrels to block off the I-10 eastbound. Okay, so that's literally what happened. Is as I'm approaching that split to head through Mississippi and into Florida, uh, I saw that I was within 5 or 10 minutes of being forced to go northward toward Jackson, Mississippi, and I was really startled. I was really startled because I thought, oh my God, they're closing the interstate. If I would have been another 20 minutes later, I wouldn't have got uh, to go where I wanted to go. So that was the first indicator to me that something was wrong because I couldn't understand why they were going to shut down I-10 eastbound out of Louisiana into Florida. And so the wheels get spinning, and I thought, wow, this is it's kind of odd, but I'm glad I made it. Mostly because I was going to my mother's house. Okay, I was going to see my mom. I had already called. We called. Phone calls were happening, and so I had already called my mom and said, "Hey, I'm coming." And it was just me and the cat. Like I said, my son and his grandparents and his mother, they went towards Texas. And so eventually I reached my destination. And I vividly remember it. I really do, because my mom was watching CNN. These were the days of CNN. And so I remember my mom watching CNN, you know, and we saw the hurricane land. And we saw that it was some severe wind and not really too bad. Wasn't really too bad at all. And I thought, okay, mom, it's fine. It's going to be fine. Well, this is where it begins to get a little blurry in my memory because honestly, it's really difficult to put things into sequential order or remember dates and times and those sorts of things at this point because this is where it turned insane. Um, so from here forward, it's less of a linear story and more of a experiential, spiraling story. Because what I remember is I remember the first images. I remember those first images coming through the television screen, CNN. And in those images, I could literally see my neighborhood. And I could see that in my neighborhood, all that was visible were the roofs of houses. And and you just don't know the feeling. You just don't know the feeling because I'm looking here and I'm seeing my neighborhood. I know it's my neighborhood. I know it very well. And I'm recognizing that I'm only seeing the roofs of houses because the houses are completely submerged up to the roofs. And you know, there comes a sort of anxiety with that, a state of disbelief. It's hard to describe that feeling, but I remember it well. It's somewhat, it's this racing heart. Um, it's astonishment. It's somewhat denial. Um, it's just a lot of feelings all at once. And I remember seeing that. And then I started thinking, I know a lot of people in my neighborhood weren't leaving because we had talked about it. You know, basically, as I was leaving, you know, you stop and you roll the window down. You say, "Hey, where you going? You going? You staying? You going?" You. So that was the sort of deal. As I started thinking, wait up, some of my neighbors are still there, and up until this point, I never knew that my mom smoked marijuana. You know, had no clue. But I truly do remember the moment because as we're watching that footage, my brother comes over and my mom starts rolling these little left hand cigarettes, like 15, 20 of them. And she's like, "Here, baby." Because I remember I'm pacing. Okay, I'm pacing. I'm pacing the house. And I'm on the phone. I am trying to figure out what's happening. And I'm like, "Mom, I got to go back. I got to go back." And she's just like, "You can't. There's nothing to go back to." And so I can't even tell you how many days passed. Some days passed. And and so the entire time I'm on the phone, you know, during this week or so with lots of people, friends. And in our age of social media, it's really not the same because now all you have to do is jump on Twitter or Facebook and see what you need. But at that point, that wasn't reality, right? So what do? You're calling everybody, you're networking, you're info sharing, and so we were all calling each other endlessly in that week. trying to figure out who's where, who's okay, who we haven't heard from, blah 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 blah. You get it. And and so that's what I was doing during that period of time. And in that way, we were able to kind of get a bead on what was happening, boots on the ground. And the entire time, okay, we're watching CNN. And I'm watching the CNN and I'm saying, where's the help? Because we're like 4, 5 days in. And I'm looking at my mom. I'm like, where's the help? Why is it that no one's helping? Where are the helicopters? Because all you saw were local residents in their boats rescuing their neighbors. And it was just a level of cognitive dissonance that you can't believe. And that's the moment that I started to experience this rage about George Bush and the federal government. Because I wondered, why are they allowing these people to die? Why is there not a fleet of helicopters rescuing people? Where's the Coast Guard? Where are the 25 boats picking people up and bringing them to safety and medevacing them out of there? And every day that went by, the confusion increased and the rage increased. And I think that anyone who wasn't personally involved really can't empathize with that. Because I was positive the military could turn on a dime and within 24 hours mobilize and render aid. And I just couldn't understand how a week we were approaching a week and people were left to fend for themselves. And like I said, I had my cat. I had a suitcase of clothing, and and I had a cardboard box of a few items. And what started circulating in my brain was thoughts of my friends. And I thought, where are we going to play music now? And I thought, my job's gone. And I started wondering about those old ladies and old men in the neighborhood who I knew didn't evacuate. And like I said, my mother's doing the best to keep me calm, whisper comforting things, and clue me into reality. You're not going back. So as I'm speaking with friends, uh, we're starting to understand that the water had receded enough. And honestly, I can't tell you when this was. I could eventually figure it out, but it doesn't matter for this story. After some time, I got word that the water had receded enough that there were some places that you could go back into and check out. Now, at the time, there was a no visit order, and I don't know what you call it, but I remember that all roads in were blocked. People weren't allowed in, and the water was just receding. But I had a friend who called me and said, "Hey, I made it in. I snuck in," and then he told me the route he took, and he said, you might want to think about trying to see if you can sneak back in, go see what's salvageable at your house. So eventually, I I thought that was a thing to do. So I started making phone calls, um, and that's going to bring us to part two. So let me pull this up before I get any further. So I want to show you some context. Okay. So I want to show you my neighborhood, the neighborhood I'm talking about. Gentilly. Gentilly neighborhood through the ages. New Orleans is a city known for its rich history, diverse culture, and unique neighborhoods, each contributing to the city's distinct identity. Among these, Gentilly stands out as a community with a deep rooted history, showcasing resilience, cultural evolution, and a close knit spirit. Located in the heart of New Orleans, Gentilly's story intertwines with the city's complex growth, from its early agricultural roots to becoming one of the New Orleans' vibrant urban communities. Early beginnings, the agricultural heartland. The name Gentilly comes from the French word gentile, meaning gentle or noble, a reference to the rural and scenic landscapes of the region during its early history. Long before New Orleans expanded, Gentilly was largely agricultural, characterized by farmlands and plantations that stretched across the banks of Bayou Sauvage. The neighborhood followed the natural ridges created by the ancient Mississippi River course, an important factor that will later influence its development. In the 1700s, French settlers started to shape Gentilly into a farming community, cultivating crops like sugarcane, rice, and indigo. The fertile soil and proximity to waterways made it an ideal place for agriculture. Many enslaved people worked the land, laying the foundation for the economy and culture that would later define Gentilly. While it was somewhat removed from the urban core of the French Quarter, Gentilly's agricultural importance cannot be understated, as its farms helped sustain early New Orleans. The growth of infrastructure from farmlands to urbanization. Gentilly's transition from farmland to an urban neighborhood can be traced to the 19th century when New Orleans experienced population growth and expanded beyond its original boundaries. By this time, the introduction of new infrastructure, including roadways and rail lines, made Gentilly more accessible to those looking to settle outside the city center. The development of historic Gentilly Ridge, a high ground area running along modern day Gentilly Boulevard, became pivotal to the neighborhood's growth. This ridge was one of the highest elevations in New Orleans, which made it a preferred settlement area, as flooding was less likely than in other parts of the city. As drainage technology improved, particularly after the construction of the New Orleans drainage system in the early 20th century, Gentilly Ridge became even more attractive to developers and home builders. By the early 1900s, Gentilly was no longer just farmland. It had become a burgeoning residential community. Neighborhoods like Milneberg, Edgewood Park, and Pontchartrain Park began to form, and the architectural landscape of the area shifted from rural homes to more structured suburban designs. The impact of education and religion. One of the critical elements of Gentilly's identity has always been its strong ties to education and religious institutions. In the early 20th century, as Gentilly's population grew, schools and churches played a significant role in fostering community. The establishment of Dillard University in 1935 was a monumental event in the neighborhood's history. Dillard University, a historically black university, brought a new intellectual and cultural dimension to Gentilly. The university has been a beacon of education and civil rights, contributing to the broader movements within New Orleans and the United States during the Jim Crow era and the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Churches like St. James Methodist Church, St. Leo the Great Catholic Church, and Franklin Avenue Baptist Church became spiritual and cultural centers, drawing residents together and providing stability during challenging times. These institutions were not just places of worship, they were places of gathering and discussion, helping to strengthen the bonds within the Gentilly community. Gentilly in the mid 20th century, Pontchartrain Park and African American empowerment. A pivotal moment in Gentilly's history came with the development of Pontchartrain Park in the 1950s. As the first suburban style subdivision created specifically for middle class African Americans in New Orleans, Pontchartrain Park was a landmark of black empowerment. In an era marked by segregation, Pontchartrain Park provided African American families with home ownership opportunities and a sense of pride and community. The neighborhood featured single family homes, schools, parks, and recreational facilities, including the Pontchartrain Park Golf Course, which became a hub for community activities. Notable residents of Pontchartrain Park include the iconic jazz musician Ellis Marsalis, whose family has played a significant role in shaping New Orleans' musical heritage. Pontchartrain Park became an anchor of Gentilly, symbolizing the broader struggles and triumphs of the African American community in New Orleans. The neighborhood stands as a testament to the ability of communities to thrive despite the segregation and systemic racism that dominated the mid 20th century. The civil rights movement and beyond. During the civil rights movement, Gentilly was a neighborhood where activism and progressivism flourished. Institutions like Dillard University served as forums for dialogue and education on civil rights issues, and local churches became centers of activism. As New Orleans grappled with desegregation and other civil rights challenges, Gentilly's leaders and residents played an essential role in advancing the cause. Post 1960s, Gentilly experienced a period of growth and further integration, with a new wave of residents moving in, contributing to the neighborhood's diversity. As the decades passed, Gentilly became known as one of New Orleans' more stable middle class neighborhoods, characterized by a mix of single family homes, schools, and local businesses that catered to its residents. Hurricane Katrina, devastation and rebirth. And here you can see what I mean by the photographs, or the photograph of the homes here, submerged to the rooftops. Gentilly's story took a tragic turn in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina devastated the neighborhood, flooding most of the area. Much of Gentilly, including historic Pontchartrain Park, Milneberg, and Dillard University, suffered severe damage. Sorry, guys, it's traumatic. The floodwaters reached homes and businesses, causing displacement and leaving the community in a state of crisis. The aftermath of Katrina tested Gentilly's resilience. But the neighborhood's recovery showcased its strong spirit. Over the years, Gentilly residents, along with government and private organizations, have worked tirelessly to rebuild homes, schools, churches, and parks. Pontchartrain Park Golf Course reopened. Dillard University revitalized its campus, and many local businesses returned. The recovery was not quick or easy, but it marked a new chapter in the neighborhood's history, one of rebirth and hope. The modern era, a thriving, diverse community. Today, Gentilly is thriving, a diverse neighborhood that reflects the broader cultural fabric of New Orleans. The neighborhood has a reputation for being family oriented, with its tree lined streets, parks, and schools, making it a desirable place to live for people from all walks of life. The revival of Pontchartrain Park and the continuing presence of Dillard University serve as reminders of Gentilly's deep roots in education, culture, and community. Local events, such as the annual Pontchartrain Park Festival, celebrate the area's rich African American history and culture, while community markets and neighborhood gatherings foster a strong sense of togetherness. The churches, schools, and universities continue to play an essential role in Gentilly's daily life, cementing the neighborhood's reputation as one of New Orleans' most enduring and resilient communities. Conclusion: Gentilly's legacy. The history of Gentilly is one of transformation from a rural farmland to a modern urban community. The neighborhood has survived natural disasters, social upheaval, and economic challenges, only to emerge stronger and more vibrant each time. Its legacy is deeply intertwined with New Orleans' broader history, from the early days of French colonialization to the struggles and triumphs of the civil rights movement and the rebirth following Hurricane Katrina. As Gentilly continues to evolve, it remains a symbol of New Orleans' ability to adapt and thrive. Its history is a reflection of the city itself, a place where diverse cultures come together, where resilience is a defining characteristic, and where community bonds are strong as ever. The neighborhood's unique blend of education, culture, and history ensures that Gentilly will remain a vital part of New Orleans' story for generations to come. Okay, so I want to show you what we're talking about here. So, this may be difficult for you, but I'll try to show you here. Now, you can see here a generalized map of New Orleans, okay? For instance, you can see the Mississippi River winding through here. And you see the French Quarter where I'm circling the mouse. See the French Quarter here? And you can see how, with this legend here, there's the green is where there's some water intrusion, but brown here, there's no water intrusion along the river. And you can see the darker the color, the deeper the water. So if we take it back here, and I can show you, you'll see here in Gentilly here, where I'm circling the mouse now, it's extremely black, okay? Extremely dark because the flooding here was immense, okay? And you can pretty much see if you look, the darkest flooding or the most severe flooding is closer to the lake here. There's also intense flooding down here and over here in the eastern New Orleans. So if you look here, this is called the lower ninth ward here, down here where I'm circling the mouse. This area here got deep water as well. This received most of the press. You know, when you saw the news coverage, a lot of it was here. You can see how here in New Orleans East, at the top of the screen, there was some severe flooding in eastern New Orleans. But anyway, back to Gentilly, which is where I'm circling the mouse now. So this was a neighborhood. Okay, so I'd also like to show you this graphic here. New Orleans elevation. The city of New Orleans sits between Mississippi River and Lake Pontchartrain. Most cities have a higher elevation than the water, but most of New Orleans is lower than the water that surrounds it. Water does not run into the city typically because there are natural and man-made levees to hold the water back. Okay. So you can see here your typical level of water is about 14 or 10 feet, which pretty much submerges the entire city were it not for the levee systems. It's an absolutely ridiculous setup here. And you can see here how low the city sits and how when you get to Gentilly and near the lake, you're actually below sea level. So were sea level to come, you'd still be below sea level in these areas. And this is exactly what happened. And anyway, if you look here where I'm circling the mouse, this would be near the French Quarter, near the Mississippi River. Okay. This area is closer to City Park in the center of the city. And this area here is a Gentilly area. And this area here is the lakefront area. So this is what is meant by the bowl effect. Because you're literally in a bowl. This is why there was such catastrophic flooding when the levees were breached. And this is a really good slideshow here. This is going to show us several phases of the flooding. Okay. You can see the levee breaches here. And it comes in. Then there'll be more here. And they'll show the surge as the hurricane comes in. You see the surging water coming in. And here you'll see the surge comes into the lake, fills up the canals. There are more levee breaches. And here you're going to go with Gentilly. It's going to get it. Monday, August 29th. So you can see how there's just catastrophic failures of all the levees. And the suburbs, and no one's spared. No one's spared. And again, this is that graphic. As you can see here, over 10 feet of water in Gentilly here. And that's how it all happened, with a systemic failure of levee protection in every part of the city. Now, back to my story. So, I'm not sure when it was. I want to say it was anywhere from 2 weeks to a month after. I got my son, and together we drove to New Orleans. And the objective was to go and see what I could salvage out of the house, if anything was left. And so I followed my friend's advice on which route to take and how to sneak around the National Guard to get into the city. And I successfully did so. Major accomplishment. And somehow I managed to not get a flat tire rolling through all the debris and the chaos and nastiness. And I pulled up in front of my house, and it was just an unbelievable sight. There were no windows, doors were caved in, and the amount of debris scattered throughout the neighborhood was unbelievable. And this is a moment that I'll probably regret forever, because when I stepped foot in there, it was a sight to behold. You remember me saying that I had a piano. Well, the way that room was set up, the room that the piano was in, there was also a daybed in that room. And so when I entered the door, the first thing I noticed that'll be forever etched in my mind is that piano has 88 keys. And as I walked in, I saw that there were piano keys scattered like confetti all throughout the place. Additionally, those of you who know pianos know that there's an extremely heavy solid iron soundboard or harp, the innards of the piano. That's what makes a piano heavy, is the hundreds of pounds of iron. And the funniest thing in the world, that I didn't see a piano at all. There was no piano at all. But there was a huge iron soundboard or harp laying on the daybed. So I walk in, there's piano keys everywhere on the floor like confetti. The iron innards of the piano is laying on the daybed. And all up the walls and the ceiling is mold growth. From floor to ceiling, it's mold growth. Ugly. Look like 1970s carpets. It's like orange and green and black and brown mold splotchy patterns all over the walls, ceiling. Also, all of my beautiful sheet music I had collected over the years had adhered to the walls and ceilings. So as I looked around, I'm looking at sort of a metaphor for my life. plastered on the walls, ceilings, and scattered on the floors. And there was not a single thing salvageable in that house. I went through, for instance, all my wonderful compact discs that I had collected for, 20 years. The water was so contaminated with petrochemicals that all the compact discs had deteriorated, because I thought I could go in and pull the disc out of their protective cases and at least salvage those discs. No, the majority of those discs were all deteriorated from the acidity of the water. We probably stayed in there an hour rummaging around. I didn't take any pictures, but I mean, it's emblazoned in my memory what I saw. I mean, if you would have seen it, you'd never forget it either. And then as I spoke to people, I realized there had been 6 foot, 8 foot, 10 foot waves crashing through that neighborhood as it was flooded to roof level. Hence, the piano and the windows broken out and the doors crashed in and all of that. And I learned that several of my neighbors had passed away and drowned right in their homes, right in my block. A nice old lady across the street who I talk to often. The man on the corner who was a part time minister, 76 years old. He had rescued a bunch of people because he owned a boat. And the story that I heard was that he had managed to free his boat during this period of flooding. And he was rescuing people and bringing them to the nearest rooftop, which was like a local corner store. And that somehow, on one of his rescue missions, he never returned, but he passed away. And so I left that city, and in some time I rented a place several hours away. And it's funny because I was frequenting a coffee shop downtown in the city I was living in. And there was this old lady. She was 86, she told me at the time, I believe. 83. But little old lady. And I got to talking to her, and turns out she had stayed for the storm. And she had this little bastard poodle that was so fucking mean. And then she told me the story that she said, forgive him. He's traumatized. He was never like this. But then she told me that during that week or two after the storm, when all the looters going through looting. There are also guys going through raping. And she had a daughter who was middle aged. And some guys went in to assault her mentally challenged daughter. And she said, and that little dog aggravated the shit out of them to the point or to the extent that they moved on. Because when they came in the house, that little dog turned into a monster. And anyway, it was during this time that I lost my brother and I lost my grandfather. It was an immense period of grief, and all my friends had scattered like with the wind. Friends everywhere. And I knew that something had been lost that was intangible. And that was the community, the relationships within the community. Because all of those years prior, all that had been cultivated and worked on, it all disintegrated, just like that piano, you know. And you can't just pick up the pieces and glue them back together and recreate what once was. For instance, my son's grandparents, they were gone. All of my friends, they were gone. I was gone elsewhere. But at least we were here. Because there were a whole bunch of people who didn't make it. And this is the reason I decided after some time I have to reclaim as much of as I can of my life. So about a year later, I defiantly returned to New Orleans. And I got another place. And I went right back to work. And all those kids were so damn bad because they had lost a year of schooling, many of them. The first graders never had kindergarten, the second graders never had first grade, and on and on and on. So those years after, it was basically a big it was like a huge therapy session that lasted 5 years. Many of them lost their parents, their grandparents, family members, their houses. So, what was supposed to be school turned into more of a therapy session for all the students and for the teachers, because we had also been through it too. And in some ways, that still continues to this day. But every year, it gets a little easier. I guess in some way, it's part of the reason that I left, because you're constantly reminded. And I was a good saxophone player. I was a good saxophone player. I was an excellent alto saxophone player, and I was just a good saxophone player altogether. I was an excellent saxophone player, and within 10 years, I had to quit because that one day of mold exposure was so impactful on my system that it changed my entire state of health. I never had asthma problems, never had problems breathing, never had problems with allergies, never had problems breathing. But I suddenly realized I couldn't handle household dust. I couldn't handle cats or rabbits. I couldn't handle normal allergens. Couldn't handle cigarette smoke. I couldn't handle just breathing. And the thing is that mold never left the city. So not only was it the one major exposure, but upon returning, it was every day, every day. And there are many places now that still have not been properly remediated for mold. So if you get a house in the flood zone, you never know if there's mold growing in those walls or under the floor. And I miss playing that saxophone. I really do. But I remember the last day that I did, because the last day that I did, I knew I could no longer. And hitting the nebulizer or the inhalers, it only gets you so far. It's like crutches. And so it has been a lot of effects in so many ways. Like I said, the breaking up, well, first the losing of friends and neighbors, then the breaking up of relationships, of jobs, of community structure, of friendships, of bands, of projects, of schooling, and then the physical ailments that came along with it. And as we all eventually kind of found ourselves back everyone's trying to rebuild and put the pieces back together. And that's also an anxiety inducing environment. And as you could see earlier, the grief never goes away. There's the grieving process is ongoing. And it's funny because 20 years later, we're now at the 20-year mark of that entire catastrophe. And it's difficult because it's hard to describe to someone what existed before. Because what existed after, or what came after, was not really anything like what existed before. And it's hard to describe that to people. I mean, even in 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12, with a whole new wave of people coming in and a lot of gentrifiers and stuff, it was hard to relate to a lot of newcomers because you felt like you don't really understand what existed before. It's kind of like a dream. It's like awakening from a dream, and you can't go back to that dream you were having. And that's how this is. Can't go back to what existed before. And it was very beautiful and very rich. But I guess in some way, this is my attempt to tell the story person to person, personally, a personal story. In some ways, it's about beauty and friendships and culture and community and trying to relay something that's intangible, which is nearly impossible. And I guess in that way, the only place that exists is within us. And it's a difficult thing to come to terms with. There are so many, mm, I don't know, like an effervescent experience that can't be described. So many of them. It's part of the reason I wrote my book and am still writing my book on music because there's something so special, just like the physical beauty of the place. There's something so special in the music of that place, just like the food and other aspects. But there's just this indescribable beauty, something you can't really put your finger on. And in a way, this is why it's somewhat of a eulogy, because Hurricane Katrina took all that away, permanently erased it. And it'll never return. It's only in what we knew it to be or what we know it to have been. And in the years since, in these 20 years, a lot of people have passed away. They've passed on. And so, even what remains is slowly going away. And that's a sad thing. Because what it is ain't what it was. And it will never be. But I hope that this helps you in some ways conceive of the magnitude of that event now 20 years later. And for those of you who are friends of mine or viewers of mine, hopefully it helps you understand me a little better. Because with all this hate in this community that's just fucking seething with rage and darkness, like, people forget that we're people. And there were things that meant a lot to us and still do. Well, I want to thank you for coming. I think I'm going to get out of here. I'll leave you with a piece of music that I created with my New Orleans friends some 10 years ago. And hopefully you enjoy it. Again, if you're on the replay, please leave a channel comment down in the comment section. Let us know where you're from, what you think, and what your feelings are. Um, it's been a difficult period in rewatching some of the footage from that time period. And coming to terms with it's been 20 years, and 20 years doesn't seem like it. But we'll do another show soon. Please, again, support the channel, visit our pathways, and also pray. Anyway, I'd like to thank Carla Ann, Elizabeth Jones, Quadaxo Mimi, Sweet Dude Shibby, sweet Dude Shitty, Critter Mama, Jade, Conchella, Miss Pie Crust, Lisa, Samantha Springman, Mandy, Gretchen, Pertinent, Aarontown, Four Pits, Across America, Hiawatha, Dieter, Fur Baby Daddy. Who else is here? Heather Brown, Mino Dino, David Rogers, Teresa, Bonnie, Nicole Watt. Anyone else who was here? Thank you very much. David Rogers sent a super sticker. Thank you very much for the super sticker, David Rogers. Appreciate that. I didn't see it. Amy G, how are you? What's up, Amy G? And whoever else I've missed, I truly appreciate you taking the time to listen to me today. Christina, hi, Christina. Let's see who else we got here. Oh, Dirty Diana, thank you for the super chat. Thank you very much. Guys, there's a lot from this story that I'm forgetting because it's hard to tell. But I'll fill in the gaps later. If there's any questions, leave the questions below, and I'll try to fill in some gaps in the comment section because I know I left stuff out. But I do appreciate you. And thanks again, Diana and David Rogers. I'm going to put the music on now. Me and my New Orleans friends, and I'll get out of here, and I'll see you guys later. Maybe even sooner than later.